Greetings, boils and ghouls. This is your comrade, the Crypt Keeper here, reporting dead from the sanctuary of the strange. Tonight's macabre myth is a fright-filled feature, one overflowing with monsters, madness, and magic.
Welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I am Justin, here with my co-host Mitchell. Say hello, Mitchell.
Hello, Mitchell.
And today we are joined by a very special guest, actor, producer, director, and all-around chatterbox, Mr. Nicholas Vince. Nicholas, how the hell are you?
Well, when I stopped giggling because I knew Mitchell was going to say, hello, Mitchell, I'm very well, obviously. I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Like I said before we started, man, thank you for giving us some of your time. So I guess to get started here, take us back in time. What sort of films and fiction were you consuming as a child to kind of get the juices flowing back then?
Well, funnily enough, I've literally just, I pressed stop on a documentary on the film 2001, A Space Odyssey, and realized I was about 11 years old when I first went to see that in the cinema. I remember very excitedly saving pocket money up and going by myself. I grew up in a small town in Sussex, and you could do that at 11 years old, just say, I'm going to the cinema and take yourself there. And I don't think I got to the very end. I've just found that film so boring.
Yeah, I didn't know where you were going with that.
It's a slow burn for sure.
It's so boring. Oh my God, it's nearly for an 11-year-old who obviously no one even thought about
life's greatest mystery,
lightsaber, or anything science fiction for me was Doctor Who. So definitely watched Doctor Who from behind the sofa because the Daleks were so scary. So I'm talking about really young, or sitting on the sofa with a cushion on my lap so that I could cover my face if things got too scary on TV. So I was kind of fascinated and repelled, and then kind of in my teens, then I got to watch the Universal horror, monster movies, Frankenstein, etc. But I was always reading ghost stories a lot, short stories, loved short stories, reading H.H. Munro, Saki, because he wrote basically short stories that are half a dozen pages long because they were designed for newspaper articles, but they're incredibly intense and very clever. Shredni Vashtar is one of my favorite short stories of all time. So yeah, that's kind of my background as far as interest is concerned.
Do you prefer short stories?
Yeah. Do I prefer short stories? Honestly, I don't get much time to read just for fun.
Right.
So I tend to read late at night as a way of kind of shutting down for the day and going to sleep. And honestly, I tend to reread Terry Pratchett books because I know they're not going to, it's like, don't get me wrong, I love Clive Barker's writing. And I have to read that during the day just so I can concentrate properly. And I know I'm not going to get too scared to be able to go to sleep.
It's funny hearing you say that.
Oh my God, that character is terrifying. That's me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who knows me knows what a great wuss I am. My problem is I get very involved in things that I'm watching or reading. I am completely suggestible. I am the person, if I'm watching Big Dipper, the things, fairground ride thing, I will be sitting in my seat swaying and moving backwards and forwards because it's real as far as I'm concerned. And
So do you recall a eureka moment where you finally decided to give acting thing a try? Were you in drama or anything when you were younger?
Yes. Bottom line, I was always a show-off. I did a lot. I really primary school onwards, so I'm like 6, 7, 8 years old. I'm doing the Christmas nativity play. When I'm 11, my English teacher, a lady called Mary Salomon, she invited me to join the local amateur society in Horsham, the Horsham the Theatre 48. Theatre 48 is what because they were formed in 1948, a long time before actually not that long before I was born, come to think of it. Anyway, Theatre 48, every chance I got from the age of 11 onwards, I was always doing at least 2 or 3 productions a year. Amateurs, literally every constantly. Well, the great thing, the thing is, I was a young man who was interested in doing drama, and there are not that many of us around. And I grew up in, as I say, West Sussex in England. And certainly when I was in my teens, there were more amateur societies in West Sussex than any other county in the United Kingdom. So every village, lots of villages in Sussex, and most of them had their own amateur society. And then, you just got invited to go along because you're the young man who was interested in drama. Did a lot.
Did you have any favorite roles to play?
2 I remember most clearly were, of the 3, yeah, I played all the young, as I say, when I was 11, they were doing a Christmas entertainment based on the work of Charles Dickens. So I got to play all the boys in, Pip, in Great Expectations and so on. I remember that one very clearly. I remember I played a really small part in a play about Henry VIII and one of the wives. I was a page, and I had to walk in and say, "Make way for the king," and take my hat off, and do a big flourishy bow. And I think I got a write-up in the local paper saying Nicholas Vince spoke his lines very clearly. Local paper, that's what you do, you praise all the actors and say they spoke their lines very, and I think, and then there was I'm trying to remember, there was another, I can't remember the name of the play, but there were a couple of other parts. Yeah, I had so much fun.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, Nicholas, but it looks like that your role as the Chatterer was your first professional gig. Is that true? How did that come about?
It was my first film. I'd done theatre. I'd already got, because in those days you couldn't do film without having an actor's equity card. It was a closed shop. So I had done theatre work in order to get my equity card to do that. So yeah, Chatterer was my first film work.
Was it a typical audition and you got the role?
No. I knew Clive. I'd been modelling, Clive Barker this is. I had been modelling for Clive I'd known him for about 3 years. So Clive, I don't know, you familiar with his Books of Blood, the short stories?
Yes.
Lots of nodding heads, yeah. Okay, so in the UK, they were published in paperback, and then they were published in 6 volumes in paperback, and then they were published in hardback because the paperbacks did so well. They then went out. So it was odd. That's the reverse way of doing it. Normally you do the hardback first, and then you do paperback. And Clive painted the covers of the Books of Blood. So I modelled for some of those. I appear in various forms. I'm volume 1 up there, stripped to the waist, holding up a photograph of Clive with a knife sticking out of my head.
Wow, this is blowing my mind. Like, so you're like deep in the Hellraiser lore. Like you're like even beyond the movie.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is the great thing that when we did Hellraiser, Clive involved all his mates. Basically, now Doug Bradley, obviously they were at school together.
Mm-hmm.
Doug and then Clive, since they'd known each other since they were teenagers, and then Doug had joined Clive for the theatre group that Clive created called the Dog Company. Simon Bamford, who plays Butterball in Hellraiser, Simon and I were at drama school together, and Simon went off to join the Dog Company as an actor, and so he'd already worked with Doug and so on. And then I basically just met Clive at a party. I'm pretty certain it's most likely that Simon would have invited me to a party, and that's where I met Clive, because basically Clive lived near the drama school I studied.
Hellraiser is one of those staple franchises with Halloween, Friday the 13th, and all those. So when you guys are there in the moment filming, did you have any inkling what it was going to become? Could you feel it in the air?
No, I think what we did feel was that it was unusual. The line I always use is, no teenagers were harmed in the making of this movie, which is very different to all the stalk and slash. And I have nothing against stalk and slash films, but the staple of horror movies in those days, starting with the great Friday the Nightmare on Elm Street, is stalk and slash. I think, the costumes are amazing. The look was nothing, there was nothing that you could really point to. Well, particularly not in the UK. I mean, there's a really small film industry in the UK that was like it. well, that we knew, that I would still be talking about this, nearly 35 years later. Extraordinary. Yeah, no, that is extraordinary to me.
Like we just mentioned those other slashers, Hellraiser is a bit different. Not that there's anything wrong with slasher movies, but the subtext and plot of Hellraiser is a bit more deep than your typical slasher, I would say,
Yeah, it definitely is.
Not to, piss anybody off out there.
Oh,
but...
yeah. No,
Yeah, but I mean, well, we're just saying there's, a plot.
Well, there's that, and the fact that it's about adults rather than teenagers.
Right.
It's adults who are giving into there, and I was watching. What was I watching the other day? I was watching Chopping Mall the other day because I was interviewing Barbara Crampton on my show, and I thought, yeah, this is purely has every single trope. If you have sex, you are going to die. If you're a virgin, you live at the end of the movie. I suppose that is true of Hellraiser, assuming that Kirsty is still a virgin at the end of the movie. But yeah.
Maybe there was a deleted scene somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, the boyfriend definitely is sleeping on the floor in that movie.
So Clive, that's just his MO, I would guess. Like he just kept all of you guys on for the first, second film, and then Nightbreed, same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of course he didn't direct Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, because he was preparing for Nightbreed. He just kind of phoned up and just said, Nick, would you like to be in Nightbreed 2? I've got a part for you. Because yeah, I'd love to. And you mean I get lines? You mean I get to see? Hell yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, so out of those two roles, which one were you spending more time in makeup for?
Funnily enough, in order to be prepared, Kinski in Nightbreed, it was 5 hours, because that was 7 different pieces that were glued to my face. So that was a makeup chair at 4 o'clock in the morning after having got to Pinewood. So basically the car would pick me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the chair for 4 o'clock in the morning, and then on set at 9, usually without eating, because that would muck up the makeup. And then, but I say all that, it's tough on the actors, but all we have to do is stay still and stay awake. We're not the people who are actually applying the makeup, who are on their feet all that time and so on. So, it's huge kudos to Neil Gorton and Mark Coulier, who, actually created Kinski for that. Going back to the amount of time I was actually left in the makeup, Hellraiser, there were a couple of 8-hour days where I was left in the makeup and wasn't filmed around, because I always used to get us ready in the morning. This is for my death scene in Hellraiser. I remember we just never quite got to the end where we were being filmed.
Right.
So a couple of days where I was just left in makeup for 8 hours. It was like, oh, God. I was getting paid. I was getting overtime. It wasn't the end of the world at all.
That's funny because Tom Noonan said something similar about his Frankenstein makeup on Monster Squad, that it would take so long that some nights he would just drive home to his apartment in his Frankenstein costume, and he actually got pulled over one time in his Frankenstein costume.
This is something I learned recently about Boris Karloff, was that often they just didn't take him out of the makeup, and they just propped him up against a wall and let him sleep, and then started the next, because it would take so long to put on, like take so long to get off.
Right.
I mean, as it is, 5 hours into the Kinski makeup, and for any basically any prosthetic makeup where you've got lots of pieces, it took an hour to take it off. So very long days all around. Of course, Chatterer was much easier in terms of actually getting into makeup and costume. That was only an hour to get in, because the Chatterer makeup was literally just the chattering teeth, then the mask over the top, plus a bald cap to keep my hair down. So yeah, there's the things. But hey, I could hear, speak, and see when I was wearing Kinski. I really didn't care.
That's a plus.
Yeah.
And you look back on the cast of Nightbreed, it's pretty nuts. You got yourself, Clive, and Doug Bradley's playing like the monster Moses. Craig Sheffer, David Cronenberg's in that movie. He's a serial killer therapist, which is nuts. So what was your experience like on set filming with all those people and all this stuff going on?
It was fun because I think I didn't have any scenes with David Cronenberg, so I kind of got to meet him once. And say, hi, I'm Nick. So that was it. Although I do remember standing in the corridor in Pinewood Studios with Pete Atkins, who went on to write Hellbound and a few other, and Hellraiser 3 as well, and is a screenwriter over in America now. A great friend, again, from Clive School and Dog Company days. Pete Atkins was a mate by that stage, and just saying, Nick, we're in the corridor at Pinewood. Come listen. walking up to this office door, and I can just hear a manual typewriter through the office door, and it's David Cronenberg typing up the screenplay to Naked Lunch. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool. What was the experience like with it? They were great. I became fast friends with Anne Bobby, plays Laurie. So Craig Sheffer a bit. In fact, when we finished Nightbreed, I used the money to travel to America for the first time and ended up in Los Angeles and ended up on Venice Beach. And I was there with a girlfriend from drama school in the UK who'd moved out there and got married and so on. And we were walking down the street. And I was just like, walking along the beach in Venice Beach. And I was saying to my mate, to Holly, it's like, I know what's really weird about now is like, I'm walking down the street and nobody's saying my name. Nobody's calling out to me. I really do feel a stranger here. Because I was used to living in London, in a place where I'd be, either at home where I grew up or in London, drama schools. So, you're always bumping into somebody, and you literally just the words left my lips, I heard somebody saying, "Hey, Nick," and it's Craig Sheffer. Just happens to be on the beach that day with a bunch of mates. So met Craig and so on. I think what really impressed me was just the size of the sets on Nightbreed, because when we made Hellraiser, we were either on location in the house or in a really tiny, really, really small studio called the Production Village. So, the size of the studio wasn't much bigger than the size of the torture room where Frank does his reappearing in Hellraiser. That was the studio itself wasn't much bigger than that room. And then we go at Pinewood, and you've got 3-story sets for the entire side of Midian and so on. It's extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. So that, and the scale of it was so much bigger, and that's where we got, so from a crew and of image animation, I'm guessing there are about a dozen of them, suddenly around about 30 odd makeup artists, and all these people being involved. It was just a huge production.
I was going to ask you that, because one of the things that sticks out about Nightbreed is just the amount of monsters, like cool looking monsters that are in the movie. It's an army of monsters. There had to be a lot of makeup artists, tired makeup artists on that movie.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of makeup artists are, working to, as I say, Neil Gorton, who did Kinski, and Mark Coulier. Well, Mark's got a couple of Oscars to his name now for makeup. And Neil has gone on to create his own effects company and did all the special effects makeups for the new Doctor Who TV series has been running for a few years now, starting with Christopher Eccleston. So many of the people, and even now when I do small independent films, there are a couple of occasions where I've gone onto set and said, "Nick, nice to see you. You probably don't remember me, but I was working on Nightbreed in makeup art, then." So a lot of people started up around about that time. There's a whole generation of people.
Awesome. You just mentioned indie horror scene, and I wanted to ask you about the indie horror scene in the UK. Obviously, I'm from the United States, never been to the UK, but I would imagine that given the history of horror in the region being the birthplace of Hammer, I would imagine that it's a very strong indie scene over there.
It's interesting. I think there are an awful lot of people. I think I regularly, each year we have a 5-day horror film festival in the West End of London called Fright Fest, which I've been going to a few years now, and meeting a lot of UK independent filmmakers, quite a few people there. But I think there is one company in particular that immediately springs to mind that is like horror, and that's Hex Media or Hex Studios, who who did The Unkindness of Ravens and many others, The Black Gloves I was in, and they've done anthology films and so on. They really are a studio, a proper studio, and it's really small. It's a really small independent studio based out of a church up in Scotland. But they are responsible for creating their own material. They work internationally with producers and so on, and they do their own distribution. They do their own creating of DVDs and so on. So there are, and then there's other companies that I've worked on, Book of Monsters with Stuart and Paul and so on. There's some really talented independent, Katie Bonham, Mark. A whole load of people who I don't really want to mention lots of names. Going to forget somebody. They'll hate me. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There are. I think, again, I was talking to one of the guests on my show, and just saying, it was Barbara Crampton, in fact, when she was saying when she returned to acting, she was amazed at the fact that people are not just actors, they're not just writers or producers or directors, they do everything. Like, I'm talking to John Harrison, who worked with George Romero on Creepshow and so on. You know, George Romero was, to me, is the ultimate independent filmmaker.
Agreed.
Yeah, you know, he'd do sound, he'd do lighting, he'd do everything. And I think this is what I find quite extraordinary, is that the fact, and of course now that's even easier because the technology is a lot more accessible. When you're not having to deal with film, you can just, you know, everything is done digitally. You put it onto your computer. You can, anyone, it's even free, you know, DaVinci Resolve, you can actually edit and colorize your film for free. You don't have to be shelling out large amounts of money, and there are plenty of free screenwriting apps and so on. So yeah, I think, you know, there has been a democratization of the filmmaking process. So yeah, there are some really good independent filmmakers in the country. Anthony Hales is another one. I was going to forget. Just done a couple of films with him. 2, 3. I'm losing count now. Yeah, done a couple of films recently with Anthony.
Are you familiar with George Romero Jr.'s work, his son?
I'm not, which is shame on me, because I was talking to Suzanne Roger, George's widow, and that didn't come up. No, I'm not familiar with his work at all.
When we get out of here, you should look up his son. His son is George Romero Jr., and he runs a film production company called the Indie Brigade, and he's basically just following in his dad's footsteps, making indie horror films.
Oh, wow.
Yep, he's the man. I'm probably going to have him on soon, so that might be somebody you would like to reach out to too, and just talk to him about his dad. You know,
right? Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I'd not come across.
He's very accessible. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you.
Oh, brilliant!
So in 2016, you directed a short called "The Night Whispered." Was that your first time stepping behind the camera?
It was. Sorry. I do keep on hesitating every so often, just because of my old age. I think, am I saying something stupid now because I've forgotten something? No, it was. Definitely it was. And that came out of my previous YouTube show, because the current show is called The Chattering Hour. And then the previous one was called Chattering with Nicholas Vince. These days I'm talking to really established people who've had long careers for 40 odd years. Previously, I was concentrating on independent filmmaking. And that really came out of having chatted with, well, basically, when I first started going to Fright Fest, because I took a long break away from acting and then didn't return until 2012. And then suddenly people started asking me to be in their films and to do their short films. And I met quite a few of them through Fright Fest. And they are just really, really talented people. And I thought, this is fun. This is great. And I was chatting to them and I thought, I really should have a go at this. It's something I really would like to do and have a go. So yeah, that's how The Night Whispered came about. Again, just basically asking people for favors and so on, and making it and doing and filming on what turned out to be the coldest night of the year, because basically it was 10 degrees Celsius, kind of where we are, kind of autumn weather. We were filming in November, wasn't too bad. It was 10 degrees Celsius or about 50 Fahrenheit, something like that. Not bad at all. The night we filmed, it dropped to 0. Literally just that night, it dropped to 0 degrees Celsius. So all the fact that everyone is wrapped up really warm and you can see all the actors' breath frosting, that's not special effects. That's because it was just cold.
All natural.
It was just so cold. Even my dog, who's got a part in the film, he bless him, we were wrapping him up in blankets, in hot water bottles. At one point, my husband was lying on top of him just to keep him warm. Just so he wasn't, because he's so short. Bless the little cock. He did very, very well in the movie.
I know you have an origin story that you wrote yourself for The Chatter, and I don't want you to spoil it too much, but can you give us some hints?
Gosh, yeah, it's really, how do I say, yeah, it's kind of set in a mythical kind of turn of last century, so around about 1890. It's kind of set in America in that kind of era. It's not specific, it's like that. And what I do remember is when I showed it to the editor, I sent it across to the editor, he said, oh God, he said, I'm finding this really disturbing. I'm going to publish it, but it's really disturbing.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as he said, it's really disturbing. That's a good thing. Yeah, it's funny enough. It's the second origin story I wrote for the Chatterer. The first one I wrote when they released Hellbound. I was invited by a magazine called Fear to write a short story, and that was kind of just a piss take, and the fact that I was very upset by the fact that I didn't get to have my face seen at the end of the second movie. What do you mean you're making me into a child? I thought when, Doug gets to be seen, while, me, Simon and Barbie Wilde, taking over the female son, was like, what do you mean? And you're still not putting my face on film. So yeah, that was just a piss take, basically. But this was far more, this is far closer to kind of what I feel, kind of answered some of the questions that I had about the cat, and also gave me the idea, really helped me deal with the fact. And, I did actually get over myself within about a decade after Hellbound was released. So the idea of a child being in hell and growing up in hell, because the other two Cenobites revert back to being adults. So the assumption is they were adults when they opened the box and became Cenobite. This is a child, or somebody who somebody who looks very young. The hell is going on there? So that was kind of that is the origin. It's dealing with things like that.
Have you shared the origin story with Clive?
Yes, he's read it. He likes it. Clive has always been very encouraging of me writing. When I worked on my one-man show, I Am Monsters, Clive was very good about giving me a quote, advising me what I should be including and excluding, and in fact got to, so basically the story of I Am Monsters, 2019, I did this one-man show at the London Horror Festival, of which I've been the patron for half a dozen, well, it's coming up for 8 years now. I did it there, and then an opportunity arose to take it to Las Vegas and do a performance with Clive in the audience. And he was so encouraging. He enjoyed it. He was really pleased with it, and I know he's watched the other stuff as well. So, hoping to. So I'm really doing a lot more writing than I do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you got several short story collections. Like, has fiction writing always been a passion you wanted to pursue and just never had the time?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's that thing of, and it's something I've been trying to get back to recently. I actually managed, I stopped when the pandemic started. I just thought, I can't be writing horror now. This is just too depressing. I don't want to be thinking, because like many other, when you create a character, it's like a real human like a real human breathing human being, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Gosh, that's tautology.
Good characters are.
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's done properly.
Yeah, I think when you write as a writer, what I've found is it's when a character surprises you. I think that's when you know that you've got something living and breathing. You've really imagined that, and in many ways it's like acting. You've got to find that level of life in that person you are imagining. In the case of acting, trying to portray. So as I mentioned, I'd been writing short stories, and I had half a dozen of them. Yeah, about 3 or 4 published back in the 1980s and 90s, when I stopped, because I left acting for a long time and went into computers, in other words, earned money.
That's good.
Yeah, had to pay the rent, which eventually became a mortgage. But that all stopped in 2012. And the first thing I wanted to do was go back to writing. And then that's when the first collection of short stories came out. But it just takes me forever. Because I always get really distracted. It's like, oh, there's another pretty thing. Oh, this just
a problem I always run into is when you're mid-story, usually you have another idea that taps you on the shoulder, and you're like, oh, that I want to write that now, and then you just start a new story without finishing the other story.
Yeah, the way I deal with things like that is I write in longhand and pencil, propelling pencil, because I just find it much smoother on the paper than biro or anything else. I write so I have A4, which is kind of equivalent to your legal pads, which are the ones with 4 holes in that you can peel off and put in binders. So I write on the right-hand page on the alternate lines, so that when I go back, I can write in between them, cross stuff out and rub out, just cross out and write in between lines. Then when I have another idea, it's seldom about another, it might be about another story, but it's usually about another bit of the story. That's going to be a 10 pages on, then I will, on the left-hand side, I will write an A and then write a big thing, and then just remember that A means this bit, or if I'm going through editing, then I need to put in a new section, then I'll write in B, and then on the left-hand page write B, and then start writing on the left-hand page as much as I need to do.
Okay,
yeah, and that's always the first step before I sit down and write at the computer. I can write at the computer, but I find it easier to just keep going writing in pencil.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, because if I'm in the computer, I want to go back and edit all the time because it's so easy to go back. That bit's not working. I think you just have to keep going to the end. Just write rubbish. Doesn't matter what it is. Just
no one's going to see it.
Yeah. And then I'll take all of these scrawly, with my ridiculously large handwriting. I can get 4 words on a line usually. It's like huge great loops and so on. I studied calligraphy when I was a teenager. Not that I'm a calligrapher by any manner of means, but I love letter forms and so on, and beautiful handwriting, and I get fascinated by fonts. It's ridiculous. I was sitting watching a YouTube channel called Legal Eagle the other day, because that's something that was always interested me, is the law, courtroom dramas, A Few Good Men, etc. But I sort of realized, I was actually staring at the guy on the screen, like, I'm actually paying more attention to your font than I am to the typeface you're using. And thinking, gosh, that's really beautiful. I really like the font, the typeface that you're using, rather than what you're actually trying to tell me. As I say, I get distracted so easily.
Agreed. I can't type at the computer because there's too many distractions available on the computer, too many shiny buttons and pop-ups popping up. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to. I suffer from tinnitus as well, so I have to have something to drown me out, but it's got to be music that is interesting, will keep me going.
Right.
It can't be too interesting, because then I'll just
it'll distract you.
It'll distract you. I mean, I have certain things when I was writing, because I used to write, as well as writing short stories, I used to write Hellraiser and Nightbreed comics for Marvel. Then I would always put on Christopher Young's album of Hellraiser, because all I have to do is to listen to that theme music, and I am right in the world of Hellraiser. And that, I'm right there thinking about all the different things in that world that Clive created. But otherwise, it's most likely to be Sibelius or Mahler, I've discovered recently, possibly Eric Satie, Nausea, the piano pieces and so on. Just something, it cannot have words.
Right.
It has to be orchestral. Because if it's got words, I'm going to start listening to the words. And going off into the story of the song.
I do something very similar. I wouldn't go as far as to call it like method writing, but put on something that's ambient or instrumental that kind of helps you fit the mood of the story you're going for, is usually what I do, which is what sounds like what you do as well.
Not necessarily method writing, but it's more like setting the scene for yourself, trying to get yourself in the mood. Yeah.
No, I mean, I've spoken to writers who basically create playlists. The first thing they do is they will go, if they're writing about a particular period, they will create a playlist of all the songs they are going to listen, and this thing will be 12 hours long. So, all of it, just so that they've got that in the background.
I mean, it makes sense, as people will make playlists for their, when they're working out so they can focus, or when they're driving so they can focus. So it only makes sense that they would do it so they can focus when they're doing their creative activities as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And music is such a powerful, I can't find a word to express what I'm trying to say, but it invokes powerful emotions and responses and memories and so on. So yeah.
Also, when you're writing by hand, something that helps me is when you finally transfer it to PC. It's sort of like that is your editing process from the paper to the PC. Is now you're typing it back in the PC. You're like, oh well, that's stupid. I'll just leave that line out.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it's an easier way to edit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I'm transferring, and I've got things that will hold up the books. So I'm doing copy typing from the book, so I've got it beside the screen when I'm actually typing it up onto the screen. So yeah, no, absolutely. What's written is very, very seldom the words that will actually appear. When I was writing comics, I showed people. I mean, the amount to create a 20 in the good old days when I was writing comics using the Marvel method, which is basically a page to a page, because you're going to be possibly 1.5 pages to a page of comic book, because you've only got 6 frames to play with.
Right.
Then you need a brief description, you need the dialogue, and then that's it. The rest goes to the artist, and it's all up to them. That's fine. So to create those 20 odd pages, I'd probably go through about 60 or 70 pages of notes or story ideas or character note, or just like trying to whittle things down, throw things, just shoving things down on paper.
Not necessarily an outline, just ideas.
Just literally just ideas.
Gotcha.
It's snaps of scraps of dialogue or something like that, or as you were saying, inevitably an idea for another story, something else, just so that it's recorded, because okay, well that's not for this story, but that's another cool idea, or something like that. So yeah, all those things. But also I edit at least 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Before anybody else gets to see it. It's just constantly, mind you, because in the days, the horror of those days was I was just so bad at deadlines. So bad. Oh God, in those days I had to send them off by FedEx. And the number of times a guy would be standing on my doorstep and the pages would be coming out of the printer. I have to keep him waiting on the doorstep 5 minutes. Just bear with me. It's literally just coming out of the paper. And these, like, oh my God. And it's not like I didn't have 28, a month between things. But, the first couple of weeks were always goofing off, thinking, I'm doing research. You're goofing off, Nick. Yeah.
When you're writing comics, do you have the art that's going to go with the episode, or do you sketch it out yourself? Does that help you out?
No, what I used to do was, as I was using the Marvel method, which is basically you give the artist an outline of the story and literally a panel description, the dialogue. That's all that's handed over to the artist. The artist takes it, creates the pencils. You then get it back, readjust the artwork because they haven't left enough space for your dialogue. I mean, the gun is like, okay, that's not it. Yeah, okay, where am I going to put this word bubble? And then that, we can go after the inker, the letterer, and the colorist. What I did do is, because, of course, this was the fun thing, is when I was writing my own, I wrote short stories for Marvel for Nightbreed, or either issues or short stories. Issues of Nightbreed, short stories for Hellraiser. I also had my own monthly comic, Warheads, which I was writer on. The great thing about that was in the US, you publish your comics monthly. In the UK, we publish weekly.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. So what that meant was, because they were being published in the UK and in the US, I had to have stories that would fit into 5 pages, or parts of stories, 5 pages. So each US comic was 4 times a weekly issue of about 5 or 6 pages. So there was that interesting challenge to deal with. In terms of writing a monthly Marvel comic, though, you knew which pages the adverts were going to appear on. So you have the front cover. Inside front cover is going to be an advert. And then you've got the right-hand page is your first splash page. It's your first page of your comic. And you turn the page and you might have another advert. And I can't remember quite how it works. I think they've cut it down from 22 to 20 pages now. I know it's changed recently. So basically I had a grid that showed me on the pages on which pages are an advert, because obviously if you're going to have a reveal, you want to make sure it's after you've turned a page, so it's got to be at the top left of the left-hand page. If you're going to have a surprise or something that's going to be a reveal, that's where it's got to be. So it's kind of interesting way of writing, because it means you have only a certain amount of space in which to tell your story. You know exactly where the rhythm points are. You know exactly where the surprises are going to be, your reveals are, or, you know, and the cliffhangers have to be. At the bottom right of each page, you've got to make sure that people want to turn the page.
Exactly.
So it is I think comic writing is a master art as far as I'm concerned, because that kind of story structure. And so, I mean, obviously the master as far as I'm concerned was Chris Claremont or Alan Moore. Because these are the people whose comics I was reading, you know, when I was writing.
Yeah, Jamie Delano is one of my favorite comic writers. And
Yeah.
I have a John Constantine tattoo on my arm because of Jamie Delano and Alan Moore.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. I mean, they're wonderful. You know, but I think the two that most influenced me were Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont, particularly for the X-Men stuff. That was always my favorite. People have been asking me whether I'm going to be watching the Zack Snyder Justice League, and I thought, sorry, I'm a Marvel boy. I'm not a DC boy.
And plus, you got to set aside like 8 hours to watch it. You know?
Yeah. Just schedule your whole day around.
You're a busy man.
One movie.
It's like, yeah. And it goes like, I mean, great actors. I'm so pleased that, you know, it's done. I'm so pleased he's managed to get his artistic vision. I'm so pleased actors and creators of, you know, and all the different departments involved are being involved in getting work. But
4 hours is a lot of time to commit to a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and you know, I was watching a TV program this morning about it, and they're saying, you know, the great thing is no one would think of doing a 4-hour movie expecting people to go to the cinema to sit and watch it.
No,
because of streaming and pandemic and lockdowns and so on, it feels more natural. You can actually hit pause and go to the loo, and come back and have a meal, or, you know, or watch it over 2 nights, or possibly 3.
you can watch it episodically, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember going to see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and The Sound of Music in the cinema. You had intermissions in those days. You know, these are like, they're only a couple of hour-long movies, but you still had an intermission.
Yeah, you need a strategic intermission so people get antsy, you know.
Yeah, and also so they can sell you ice cream.
Yeah.
Sell you ice cream and popcorn and Kiora drink and
all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is comic writing something that you would consider a return to should the opportunity arise?
Funny enough, somebody asked me, I think, was asking me about it. I can't imagine. If somebody wanted to pay me to do it, I probably wouldn't say no, because it's another income stream, and, you know, actor, not really been able to do a great deal of acting in the last year and a half, or going out to see folks. So yeah, it would just depend on the project. It would depend on the project, but it's so long. I mean, it's so long since I picked up a comic to read one. I've been doing other stuff, and I feel far more interested in writing film than I would be in writing comics. If somebody, you know, if I wrote a film and then somebody said, "Well, would you like to adapt this for a comic?" Or somebody, you know, "We really love your short story. You thought about adapting it for a comic?" That would be interesting. Oh yeah, that would be very interesting. But work for hire, I don't think I'd want to do work for hire again.
So with your short story collections, what Monsters Do and Other People's Darkness, would you say that there's themes with those two collections?
Yeah, according to the people who read them, I must have had a really fucked up family life, because I seem to spend most of my time saying how terrible families are. And of course, the truth is that completely reverse. I have a wonderful family. I get on really well with my family, and I'm a lovely middle-class boy who just had a really nice upbringing. And when I had my struggles, victim of bullying at school and so on. But in terms of a home life, you know, parents are comfortably off, and there was always food on the table and so on.
Just imaginative.
Yeah. I just evil-minded, I think, is the real truth of these things. So it's like, what are the themes of my book? I think what I really enjoy about writing is that I want to make them as real as possible, and then just twist one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, there's going to be supernatural elements, or there's going to be monstrous elements, or just what monsters do is mostly about the fact that people are bastards, and they don't treat other people decently. So those are the things. I am fascinated by death, and what happens thereafter when the short stories on, because I am I've been promising this for nearly 2 years now. Honestly, I am writing a third volume of short stories, which will feature a reprint of the Chatterer story, Prayers of Desire, and Clive very kindly provided a cover for it. So what happens after death, and what is the experience of being alive and death, and jealous ghosts and angry ghosts. And I personally don't believe in ghosts because I believe in reincarnation, but I like to imagine, but what if I'm wrong, or what would it be like?
Right.
And how would people behave if they are put in a particular situation? I think this is the real fun of storytelling, isn't it? It's like,
right.
Okay, I've got this really cool character, now let's be really shitty to him and see how he behaves,
right.
or she behaves, or they behave, or that's the fascinating, because we all read or watch films or experience art to find out about the human condition. We want to learn how we would behave, or how other people behave.
Conflict is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Conflict is key. I mean, I love the fact that we all think we would be the hero. We are all the heroes of our own story. We cannot possibly be the bad guy. Nobody believes that actually, that's not true. Many people. Some people really enjoy the fact that they're the bad guy, and they're kind of really interesting people to talk to sometimes, but you wouldn't want to spend any time in their company, certainly not in the woods. So just tip: don't go into the woods with a psychopath. Just look out for it. Yeah. Bad idea. Just such a bad idea.
So, Nicholas, what are your favorite films? Regardless of genre. It doesn't have to be horror, just any films.
Oh, any films. Okay. Horror genre is going to be a Roger Corman, Vincent Price, Mask of the Red Death. I've spoken about that before. That is always just a film I come back to really, really enjoy. Recently, the film that I kind of had the soundtrack on repeat, and we watched it again the other day, and that was me mostly in tears watching it, is The Greatest Showman, which I just think is wonderful. And I don't understand why it doesn't have a much higher rating on IMDb, because I just think it's joyous. It's absolutely joyous. It's not a documentary about the life of P.T. Barnum. It's taking the idea of being strange, the oddities, as they refer to the bearded lady and her pals. It's great music. It's really just fun music, which I got things in my head. So those are probably, and then it's going to be something from Pixar. It's going to be WALL-E, Big Hero 6, best Big Brother in the entire world, as in Big Hero 6, and is that what were we watching last night? The Lego Movie 2. Really enjoyed that last night as well. I love Lego movies, because everything is awesome. And what I love about that film is, the first film is all about fathers and sons. The second movie is all about siblings getting on with each other. Have you seen them?
I have not.
Oh, they're wonderful.
I'll have to give them a watch.
Yeah, no, they are definitely great films. They are funny. They are really, really funny. As far as everyone has obviously had a really great time on those films. So
I'm just picturing someone like messing with the lament configuration, and inside the Chatterers are watching Up.
Well, yeah.
That's funny. Well, Nicholas, we're coming up on your hour. I do not want to keep you any longer than we have to. So what else do you have on the horizon? Where can folks find you? I know you have your own podcast. Tell us where to find you and where to listen.
Okay, so basically, if you head over to nicholasvince.com, you'll find my shop. So obviously not being out to conventions, but if you want to buy autographed material, that's good. nicholasvince.com. You'll also find links there to the Chattering Hour, which is hosted by the Chris Rowe Management, which is my manager. It's on their YouTube channel. That's where I've been chatting to the likes of Malcolm McDowell, Barbara Crampton, Suzanne Rocher, George Romero's ex-wife. John Harrison just went up on Thursday. He's the man who's behind the TV Dune miniseries back at the beginning of the century. He's an extraordinary guy, and also he directed Clive Barker's Book of Blood. Wrote and directed.
Oh, we talked to Brandon Braga from that film. He was yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the new Hulu. This is the film from a few years ago. So yeah, that's the easiest thing to try and remember because it's my name. Head over there, but you will find me there. I am on Facebook, probably on Facebook. And I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. Mostly when I'm on Twitter, I'm retweeting tweets for the Green Party. Because during the pandemic, I thought, for the first time in my life, I'm going to join a political party. And so I joined the Green Party, and we'll be out leafleting because we've got elections coming up over here, local elections and London mayor elections and so on. So you'll find me retweeting about environmental issues and so on, because let's face it, there isn't much. Time is running out, folks, and we really need to rethink.
Those are important issues.
Yeah, and I think, really important issues. And I think people are really waking up to this fact.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I think, particularly the people who are suffering are really waking up to, the people who are actually suffering from the monstrous wildfires in your country in Australia and the flooding in Australia. It's just like saying, we've got to think about how we, governments, of course, because they're mostly run by and government for vested interests of oil, etc., are very slow to react. So yeah, no, sorry, I'm just going to take over your podcast. And
it's fine.
Rant now.
Yeah, we're okay with that.
Less work for me.
But yeah, nicholasvince.com. I had huge fun putting that website together just before Christmas into the new year. I had to learn WordPress for the first time. So please visit my website because I did spend many hours putting that together.
Yes, sir. I'll make sure to link it in the description and everything. It's been a pleasure talking to you, my friend, and our doors are always open to you.
Good.
Also, all right, Nicholas, it's been a pleasure. You have a great day. Good luck on your interview later.
Thank you very much indeed.